Hello YouTube, this is Gerrans from Qur'an.com. Today is Saturday the 26th of May 2019 and you find me on the train from Salt Lake City to Denver. It's about 7 in the morning here. I'm going to keep it quite quiet because a lot of people are still asleep. You can see the deserts of Utah rolling away behind me. Something that I don't think you get unless you travel by road or by train is the size of it. A few hours here and the scenery really changes, but it rolls on and on and on, and you can see how this would have affected the mentality of the first pioneers, having to adapt to each of the new set of circumstances. You can see how countryside like this would make you rugged. It would make you an entrepreneur. You couldn't exist if you were coming to this as pristine land. You couldn't exist in any other way except by being friendly and overcoming any obstacle. So in a way, it seems to me that the worst thing to happen to America was the West Coast, because that was the end. There was no more pioneering to be done, and once they reached the Pacific Ocean, everything kind of backed up, and it just got better and better and better and better and better at doing the same things that had meant that they were able to cross this lot. And until now we have super malls everywhere and supersize me and parking lots and have a nice day. But by travelling across the countryside of it, you can get a sense of the backstory to a lot of that, and you still feel it in the blood, in the language, in the expectations of the Americans that you speak to on a daily basis. So I have another 12 hours of this, and after which, towards the evening, I should be pulling into Denver, Colorado. I did think we might have already entered Colorado since we've been going most of the night, but not a bit of it. We're only about a third of the way down Utah. So each of these states is like a European country, basically. And lots of chemtrailing. Hold on, I'll see if I can point you in that direction. I don't know if you can see that, but the skies are awash with chemtrails, and it seems fairly obvious to me that there's a multi-front war being waged here, as there is everywhere, and it's a combination of the spraying of food, what passes for education, the indoctrination, the entertainment, the injections, all of the electronic fog that everyone's living in. So you can see how this all works together to compound some of the things and to provoke some of the things I was talking about yesterday, this sense of disconnectedness and so on. But underneath this war, underneath this silent war, you have the silent history of what made America truly great, and I can see that it was truly great, but that unfortunately is increasingly in the past. Is it too late? I don't know. Personally, I if you know my channel, you know what my thesis about the God protocol and so on. I don't hold out much hope, but I did want to see for myself this land that I'd heard so much about, and that obviously influenced by through the culture, especially coming from England, where all of American culture is just transposed wholesale with it's not translated, it doesn't need any explanation. And so in a way, American culture is an adjunct to me of British culture, and I suppose for Americans the reverse is true also. I've just had some sleep at last after pretty much a sleepless night coming down through from Salt Lake City over the desert of Utah, then along the Colorado River and over the Rockies and down into Denver, which is where I am now. And so yeah, this is the first time, I'm not saying all of Denver's like this because I don't know enough about Denver, but this is the first time I've been in an area which is pretty rough. The houses are nice. I'll just sort of show you. The houses are perfectly fine. I've spent the night here in a room here. On the surface, it looks okay, but when you walk around, you can see that it's not. There's a very high level of mental illness and tension under the surface. You can feel it here. Bail bond places. We don't really have bail bonds in the UK, but I get the impression from American TV they're sort of shady. Drug dealing and pimping, I think, is possibly one of the main stays economically of this area, although it's hard to tell. But yeah, I was walking around yesterday and I got to walking around towards the evening. I thought, I'm going to go home. I don't think this is somewhere I want to be walking around at night. So that's what I did. Well, this is Century 16 Cinema in Aurora, outside Denver, Colorado. And this place is interesting because this is where the Batman shooter got out and shot a load of people in the cinema in, I think it was July 2012. And having spent the amount of time that I've spent in the States so far, I'm not saying I sympathise with Batman shooters, but I can understand that if you had the right combination of psychological pressures and the various drugs people are taking, and you can see a lot of people on drugs walking around, almost the demonic education and the demonic music and so on, that people are going to go over the edge. And that's not even getting into the realms of monarch mind control and the rest of it, who knows. But yeah, this is where it happened, and the good sleepy patrons of this place, see all the cars, didn't see that coming. None of us see it coming. None of us see our end coming. Or few of us. Today is Memorial Day, so you've got the good citizens of Colorado are out enjoying themselves, stuffing themselves with even more. So my adventures and my investigations into what America is continue, but I thought I would show you this as a memorial to the mental illness which is part of what it is to be in America today. I'm now outside Columbine High School, where 20 years ago there was a big shooting, obviously very famously, and this is also outside Denver. And again, this puts me in mind of the mental illness that is just under the surface here in America. The idea that somehow that success has got to be there for everybody, and that if it's not there, then everything sort of collapses for the individual. Also, the drug aspect of it, and frankly the monarch control, that people can be controlled to go out and to commit these atrocities if in fact they are real. Now, of course, we've got all the fake news, the fake atrocities and so on. And for me, with somebody with a background in PR, public relations, I see these in terms of public relations campaigns. These are psychological operations that affect the mind. So, sure, one guy goes crazy and kills loads of children with a gun, and is it a crime, is it terrible and everything? Yes, of course, it's all those things. But I see it as a consequence of what's going on in the broader society, in a society which is ill. And you get that sense. The more you walk around here, you can feel that there's a whole generation of young men who have spent an awful lot of time playing video games in which they just murder people and taking mind-altering substances and have very little in the way of education and are highly entitled and feel that they should be rock stars. And you can see that there's a whole culture of people here are on drugs given to them mainly by doctors, on pharmaceutical drugs and so on. If for any reason that whole system shut down, it would get Mad Maxy and sort of the Badlands here really, really quickly. And as an outsider to America, that's something that I feel here. I can feel almost the sensitivity, the craziness that can quite easily like Semtex. Semtex is stable until you just add this one new component to it. But once that component is added, you can feel that things would get very crazy very quickly. It's bubbling under the surface. I'm now here at Cheyenne Mountain shooting range outside of Colorado Springs in Colorado. I've been with my friend Mike shooting some rifles. We're going to go off and do some pistols. This is part of how America is in some ways quite intoxicating, because you do still have a level of freedom here which we just don't have anything like this in England. And I've really enjoyed shooting, and I think that it's the best thing the Americans can do is to hold on to their guns, because it's a line between you and tyranny. But it's not just the guns themselves. You've really got to know how to use them, and just learning how to shoot, how to handle a gun means that all you've basically got to do is just kill one guy with a gun and you've got his gun now. So it's not just about having guns, it's about knowing how to use them, being sort of trained in them, and knowing how to protect yourself. That's a life skill, and I can see what a benefit it is and how it makes people really more self-reliant. And in fact, it gives me some more insight into the American psyche, because in a land where everyone has got guns, you're just going to be more polite and say have a nice day, even if you don't mean it. I've been surprised at what I've liked about America, and there are some parts of it which are just intoxicatingly excellent, and yet you can feel the underbelly, the sort of sickness that is underneath it, and that you can feel the chipmunk, as it were, gnawing away at the four corners of the table. But the table itself is extremely well laid out, and most amazing table. I've seen in the houses that I've stayed in, and I've been wonderfully hosted by a number of people now, a sort of level of material achievement that made me feel really parochial. I mean, bins that open without touching them, and all kinds of things like this, machines that clean the floor while you're watching television or whatever it is. So it just seems to kind of got better and better and better at producing all of this stuff, and it's astounding to think that everything that's been built in this country has been built in just 8 times my life. The first colonies, according to Wikipedia, so it must be true, were by the earliest pilgrim settlers was 1620. So that's 400 years ago. That's 8 times my life. In 8 times my life, this entire country has been made inhabitable. Well, not all of it, obviously, but all of this infrastructure has been put in place. So for me, I'm almost irritated by the bits that I like, because I wasn't expecting to like the bits that I like as much as I like them, and I really, really do like them. I was out shooting guns today, and I have shot guns before, but not like this. My friend we went through shooting 2.2s and then various different calibers, both rifles and pistols, and it's intoxicating. Not just the fact that you can do that, but or doing it, but the fact that you can do it. The gun culture here, the camaraderie amongst people who understand at some point that guns are their security from the tyranny. However, I have some rather mixed feelings about what you might call the American right. In my conversations in gun shops and various other places, I've been quite surprised, not so much at where the right differs from the left, but where the right has become like the left. And what I mean by that is the right has moved to the left. It's embraced the tenets of liberalism, of decadence, insofar as it now is, at least on the surface, it's paying lip service to the homosexualization agenda, where now, rather than saying this is just an evil, it's anti-biblical, it's a wrong thing, that now everyone has a friend who's who is homosexual and therefore, live and let live. I may agree with that, I may disagree with it. It's nothing to do with what I think, it's to do with what's happening to America. There are other aspects in which that's also true. So what's happening is from my perspective, and obviously this isn't some huge sociological poll that I'm conducting, this is purely anecdotal, it's purely people that I've had a chance to talk to, is that the right, the conservative right, is saying we'll kind of put up with all the rest of it, but just don't touch our guns. That seems to be where it is. So, which, from my perspective, really is a very bad positioning in terms of negotiation, because they've whittled it down so they've only really got one leg to stand on, and once that's gone, they've got nothing else. There is a sense here of, amongst people, very easily accessible, if you have some key words that you can drop into the conversation, of mistrust of government. Especially, this is a very military area, so you've got 3 or 4 major military bases here. Most of the people living in these houses will be either military or ex-military or contractors servicing military bases and so on. The conversation you can have at the shooting range, very quickly, if you lead the conversation in that way, we'll get to we don't trust the government and we don't trust anybody. And I'm fully on board with that, and I'm fully on board with having guns. I just think it's in a situation where only the government has guns, then you're asking for a head kicking. I lived in Russia. We know what the Bolsheviks did in that country, murdering tens of millions of people. So I think, speaking in the way that I do, people are a little bit on the back foot. They don't quite know what to expect. But I'm not a hillbilly. I'm not an American conservative. But I certainly go 100% on board with gun rights. Something that I've noticed about liberals, and coming from a liberal background, is that liberals only really have one way of discussing non-liberals, or very limited way. That you have conservative values because you're stupid. Only a stupid person, some kind of like redneck hillbilly, could have these points of view. I'm talking about the conservative points of view here. And if you're not stupid, then the only way that you could espouse, religious, conservative points of view is because you're lying. You're just trying to get a rise out of them. You're just saying it for effect. And that's essentially their two kind of comebacks. You're lying or you're stupid. In my case, it tends to be that they think you're, they don't have such a strong case with, claiming me to be stupid, but they will sometimes claim that you don't really believe that. You couldn't really believe that, because if you're really compassionate, then you'll agree with liberalism. Well, I don't. I've really thought about it, and I've seen the effects of it. I've seen the effects of liberalism. It's now completely discredited. It's destroyed a whole generation of children. It's destroyed 2 generations or more of men. If in the 60s it was just a theory, it was the new kid on the block, well, today we can say definitively that it is a dysfunctional ideology, and it produces dysfunction, and it produces breakdown of society. It's a virus. It's fundamentally a virus. So I don't know what's going to happen in this country in terms of the right. I fear that it's going to be people like Ben Shapiro who are going to somehow winkle pick that into their kippers. But in a way, it feels here that apart from holding on to my guns, there doesn't really seem to be much of a plan. So do I think that having guns is better than having no guns? Oh, certainly, having guns is way better than having no guns. But am I going to look to the American right for a sort of American renaissance or resurgence of logic over #my feelings? No, I don't see it. Not yet. And from what I've experienced of the religious aspect, and admittedly that has only been Mormonism so far, although I'm looking to dig into more American, really American religious ideologies while I'm here, if possible. They don't really seem to have the intellectual rigour for it. So whilst I am slightly ashamed to say that I have somewhat fallen in love with America at one level, I don't buy into it. I don't think it has the answers. I think it's, I still feel it's in a process of decay and a process of reacting of, and I think the worst thing to happen to this country was the Pacific seaboard, where there was nowhere left to expand. That frontiersmanship changed into artisanry, and it ceased being expansive and became parochial. It created a country with houses like these, they've reached the apogee of material aspiration, where you have bins that open just by running your hand somewhere close to them. Is there anything wrong with living in a house like that? No, nothing whatsoever. But you kind of feel like this place needs a war. It needs an earthquake. It needs a shaking up to rouse these people who have a great genetic memory of initiative and innovation and overcoming, to rouse them out of their shopping mall-itis, for want of a better word. I think for me, America is the world, and especially as regards the God protocol and all of that, which I believe to be correct, you'd have to be some kind of crazy psychopath to want to execute on that without, and if there was any other way. And in a way, America, you can come to America and see the world here, because it's all right here. And I'm not just talking about population diversities. I don't mean that. I mean that whatever you get in the world starts here. And if there's any hope for the future, I think I could find it here. And if I don't find it here, it means there isn't any. So it's now Thursday, the 30th of May, and I'm still here in Colorado Springs, and I really want to wrap up my thoughts for this place. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, God willing, early, and driving down to a place called Raton, where I will rejoin the Amtrak system, the train system here, but on a different line, and be taking that back west to a place called Flagstaff, and then from Flagstaff I'll be travelling again by road down to Phoenix, Arizona, and there's somebody very particular I want to see in Phoenix, and after I've been there for a couple of days, God willing, I'll be heading eastward again through the southern states toward my final destination, which is New York. So that's what's being planned. But to wrap up my thoughts about Colorado, it's very beautiful, as I might have said before, but I don't think it's really for me. I think it's a little bit too... Everything's very new here, and that's that's true of America, but it's part of what makes me a little bit uneasy about America. Being from Europe, we have old stuff around the place, and nothing is old here. Everything's either new or very new. And I think that in a way contributes to the peculiar American psychology, which on the one hand everything is possible, and because there is very little by way of precedent. I had a long conversation yesterday, a very interesting one, with a Russian who's been here for a long time, and she's the wife of a good friend of mine. We talked at length, and what she sees happening here is that, and we were able to access the parallels under socialism in Russia, is that as the Soviet Union headed toward its final demise and collapse, which I would personally see as part of a controlled explosion by the ruling elite. I don't know that she would agree with that, but that basically it became untenable largely because people were laughing at it. Everyone knew it was nonsense. And what she said was interesting, that even in probably quite white-collar, straight-laced work environment, people are now openly laughing at the embedded agenda, where if you're going to discuss anything, then you obviously have to include the lesbian wheelchair-ridden vegans' amazing contribution to science in America or whatever. You just have to plough through these ideological honorifics in order to get to your main point. And it's now become so ridiculous that people who perhaps were on board with the first stages of all of this, because a lot of it does sound fair, and I agree, a lot of it does sound fair. There are things about feminism which sound fair, they just do, but we've seen what it's morphed into, and clearly that's where it was always going, so it's discredited itself. But what I thought was interesting, what she said, was that she tended to feel that America was not, I'm putting words into her mouth, but was not in danger because fundamentally enough people are going to wake up, and that they're going to just laugh at this system. Whilst I don't agree with that analysis, I do think something is right about it, and which is that the elite, in my view, are in a hurry. They have to head this off with legal weapons in order to forestall that, so that people aren't openly mocking this political correctness. And they're going to have to get the hate, quote unquote, hate speech laws in place to frighten people. They're already doing it with speaking about, they call it anti-Semitism or anti-this-ism, anti-that-ism. I think that the next stage for America is a whole new raft of laws. I would imagine probably swept in on the back of a false flag operation. They need that. They need it here in order to stop people just laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. And I do agree with her that was one of the nails in the coffin of the Soviet Union, where people were having these 5-year plans and hearing about equality and the equality of the workers, etc. It's just like what we've got now. This is exactly the same, not exactly the same thing, but very close to what we've got now. And they were just openly mocking it. So that's got to be closed down. Will they be able to get compliance from the American people? Definitely, I think so. I don't see this people. They do have a memory of freedom. They do have a culture of at least a memory of freedom, but are they going to fight for it? I think you're going to get Ruby Ridge scenarios here, Waco scenarios, but are you going to get a war of independence? I don't think so, and the reason is I don't think that's possible in a country which has waste paper bins that open automatically and close automatically. I just think the material side of things is too intoxicating, it's too beguiling. And so the hope for America, if there is one, as it seems to me at this point, is a really sharp shock. And from what I've seen, America is getting that sharp shock, but it's in a way. Previously, it used to be that we had wars. The wars was over there; they were bad, and we're good. Male and female, clear opposites. And what it appears to me that's happening is that the ruling elite are making everything into a paste. They have no favourites. It doesn't matter what what racial background, what sexual background, what religious background you're from. They have no favourites, but what they're really focusing on is making this pace so that even now economic collapses are not, right across the board. As I mentioned before, America is suffering an economic collapse, but at the same time it appears to be going through an economic resurgence. So almost in the way that the enemy is now no longer over there. The enemy is within. The poverty is within. It's all becoming mixed up like a big paste. And so atomization, I think, is divide and rule. Atomize and rule. I think this is how it works now. Although Americans clearly have a sense of their own nation and a sense of pride in that nation, and deservedly so. I feel with the new generation of Americans, they couldn't explain to you why. They know that they have freedom, but they don't know what freedom means. And they certainly don't know what it costs. And if they did, they wouldn't pay that price. So am I on board with Camp America as the great white hope, so to speak? Definitely not. Am I intoxicated by it? Am I impressed by it? Am I somewhat irritated by my unexpected liking of it? Yeah, I am. But I'm not looking to it to provide any answers or to solve the fundamental existential question of where we are at this time vis-a-vis the Quranic imperatives, vis-a-vis the God protocol. I still see no way out of that, although I'm open to there being one. But I'm going to continue my cultural pilgrimage across America and see how I feel at the end of it. But it is a wonderful place, but it doesn't have the answers. It's a closed environment where, apart from mega churches and material perfection, it can't answer the essential questions for me, and it's become morally bankrupt and fundamentally empty, and therefore the seeds of its own destruction are embedded in the waft and web of its fabric, and I see no way out of that, despite the fact that I think it's an incredibly beautiful, stunning, impressive and exhilarating place from what I've seen of it. So that's it for now, and I'm going to leave it there. I hope everyone is well. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.